Hey, vinyl community, music community, Beatles community, how you doing? It's Matt. I'm back again for another video with a topic, or I should say, to talk about two items that are very near and dear to my heart. It's two books that go back to my young teen years, books about the Beatles that were so essential for me in my learning about them, uh, discovering new things about the band and about their music, that I always have cherished these two books. And I just wanted to see how many of you have had that same closeness to these books as I have had since you were young, or maybe you've just only recently discovered them. But they are, the first one, which came out in 1976 and was $7.95 at the time, is Growing Up with the Beatles, okay, by a man at the time of the name of Ron Schomburg, an illustrated tribute, if you remember this one. And the second one, and I do have the original that came out in hardcover in 1977 by Nicholas Schaffner, called The Beatles Forever from 77. But then a version that all my friends had who were Beatles fans was this paperback version, which is probably the more well-known version, which was released in 1978 of The Beatles Forever. So these two books for me, folks, were so important in my younger years for being a Beatles fan. I love these two books. I went through every page of them. I inside and out read these books over and over and over again to learn and discover new things about the band I love so much, the Beatles. And I have to say that at the time, $7.95 for this one. I believe the paperback was $8.95 back in 78. And to get the hardcover of this back in 77, the first printing of it, as you can see, was $19.95 in the hardcover version. Okay, but just show you the back covers of each two. This is the back cover of the paperback version, which came out in 78, of The Beatles Forever. This is the back cover of the original hardcover version from 77. Okay, and here's the back of the Ron Schomburg Growing Up with the Beatles book. A picture of Ron down there from 76. Just love to get your feedback on these books because, again, as I said, these books were essential growing up. They were just such wonderful books. To this day, many people look to these books as being two of the best you can get. The spirit behind them, you could tell that these two men, young men at the time, were such fans, had such love for the band. And I don't know whatever happened to Ron Schomburg. Maybe someone can tell me or have some information. I know tragically Nicholas Schaffner passed away many years ago, about 10 or 15 years ago. I could be off on that. If anyone has more info, if you could maybe elaborate in the comments below. But well, I never got to meet these two guys or see them at a convention. I know Nicholas used to go to conventions back in the day, especially the Fest for Beatle fans, which was known as Beatle Fest back then. He was there, and I sadly, I never got to meet him to have him sign my book. But these books meant so much to me. And again, starting with the first one, Growing Up with the Beatles, it's a great little book where this man, Ron Schomburg, goes through his life, being born, I believe he was born in the 50s, the late 50s, and to the Fab Four, John, Paul, George, and Ringo, with thanks and love. And basically, he combines pictures of him with his family and what he was going through at the time in his personal life, and how the Beatles changed his life so immensely, and just how they totally blew the world away when they came onto the Ed Sullivan Show. And he'll show pictures of himself with his hair getting a little longer as he got into more of the fandom of the Beatles. And it's just such a wonderful read. 1965, and now he's in the his Boy Scouts with his younger brother in the Cub Scouts, and he talks about the different things that he loved about the band. He talks about the things that upset him about the band, that he didn't like, and how he got away from the band for a little while when they disappointed him, and he explains how he was disappointed by them and what he did and how he came back to them, and a new appreciation and a new love for the band. So I highly recommend this book. Comes with a really cool poster inside. I haven't taken this one out, but it's a really cool poster. I've seen it. It's a great image of the Beatles from the early days. A nice poster. I just never had the heart to rip it out of here and and hang it up or anything, but goes through their whole careers, and it's 1969, and it shows him at the time he's like an Eagle Scout or something. But basically, it's just a good little story of how a young person grew up with the band, 70 to 75. Here he is over here, and what the band was going through, and what's happening in his life, graduating high school, going on to college, I believe, and beyond. And it's just such a nice little story to read about somebody's personal life and how their life weaved in and out of what was happening in the world of the Beatles, and how it impacted them and had an effect on them. And so I highly recommend this book. It means a lot to me. It, as a young, as they say, 13 or 14-year-old at the time, 1976, looking forward, looking back. Amazing that the Beatles had only broken up 6 years earlier prior to this book being written, and he's reflecting back on them and what the future may hold. And unfortunately, let's get some final pictures of the band here and some final words. But just such a great book, folks, and highly recommend this book, Growing Up with the Beatles by Ron Schomburg. Came out in 76. I believe you can still get it, right? I mean, I haven't checked to see what this thing is going for to try to get it online, but I'm sure you can find it. Oh, and by the way, that's the poster right there. The poster that's included in here is this image, full color with them with the pinkish shirts with the dark ties. That's what the poster is. And the second one I just want to talk about for a minute is the Beatles Forever. One of the, probably a little more famously known than Growing Up with the Beatles, but this book is like a must-have for any Beatles fan. And although it did come out in 77, and there's, like I say, the revised paperback with a little more verbiage from Nicholas is in the back here, where he gives a year update of what happened to the Beatles since 77 to 78. Even though it is dated and it does precede John Lennon's passing, it's just still such a great book to have. The joy he put into this book, the fun, the excitement about the band, and just the way he writes is just such a fun read. It's probably one of the most famous books about the Beatles ever written. And in my opinion, and if you talk to others, they'll probably say the same thing. The Beatles Forever. It's a must-have book. And again, in this book, it has some color and black and white images. And Nicholas really put his heart and so much hard work into this book. He basically takes it through from the beginning to the end of the band, and he has some great pictures and great images. And it's funny, as I turn through the pages of this book, it brings back so many memories, because I remember poring over this book so much when I was a kid that I have every image from this book ingrained or imprinted into my brain. And so every time I turn a page and look, the memories flood back in of these images and how they're set up in the book, because, again, this goes back to when I was a very young teenager and looking at this book over and over and over again and gazing at the images. And he goes through the different albums and what cuts were on the albums, and he goes through every concert tour in the U.S. and what songs they played on each tour. And again, now that's all like secondhand, quick knowledge for any of us. But, back then, I was just so engrossed in this type of information. Like, what songs did they play on the 64 World Tour? What songs did they play in 65? As a young kid, I didn't know this stuff. So from this Beatles Forever book, and he went through charts and what the chart placements were and when they charted singles and albums. And for a young person, this was like gold. This was like my Beatles Bible. It had every little piece of information I could ever want or know about the band. And the imagery was great. The pictures he included were fantastic. And again, he goes through charts. Every couple of pages is more charts, more releases at the time, what came out. I just can't tell you enough how great this book is. It has a nice little middle color section here I'm trying to get to show you. George playing Monopoly. Just such a great book, and brings back so many memories for me. Few pages here I just want to show you of the color section where he shows some American picture sleeves, some more with an image of the butcher cover, Yellow Submarine movie poster. Some Yellow Submarine memorabilia from the film in full color. Just such a great book, folks. I'm sure many of you remember this book, and all these images which stick out for me are must be the same for you also. It's just such a wonderful, wonderful book. And so I just want to get some of your thoughts on these two books, because they're like my prized possessions. Of all the things I have, so many Beatles books that I do have, these two are like the ones that bring me back to my childhood, to my youth. You know how certain music and certain albums bring you back to your youth. But this book itself, it talks about Paul's tour a little bit and what he played on his 76 tour. These books just bring me back to a more innocent time in my life, that just you could never take away from someone, those memories. And such great images. So I just wanted to get your thoughts again. I just went through this quick. Shows a bunch of picture sleeves. A lot of it is in black and white, but there is a few color pages. More picture sleeves. God, he showed so many of what was released up to that time. So anyway, on this one I do have the original hardcover, which is very hard to find. Mine's in pretty good shape. It's got a little tear up in the dust jacket, but overall it's in great shape. My paperback's in good shape, original from 78, 77. And so I just wanted to show these today, and just growing up with the Beatles. Again, growing up with the Beatles isn't so much as a book of knowledge as the Beatles Forever is. The Beatles Forever is just so full of knowledge and facts and tidbits and information. You gotta love this one. The growing up with the Beatles one came out a year prior, and it struck so many of us young people as just being, because it kind of mirrored a lot of our lives, in the sense like we all felt at the time we were growing up with the Beatles, learning about them and discovering them. So this Ron Schomburg book was very popular. It sold well, and a lot of people do have it or will refer to it. But probably my favorite of the books that I have going back the years is The Beatles Forever by Nicholas Schaffner. So again, just a quick video. Wanted to spread some love to these two books, see what you all thought about them, see if any of you have them. Maybe you have some more information about them, about Ron Schomburg. I have no information about Ron, what he's doing today, if he's still around or not. Like I said, Nicholas passed away several years ago, but two great authors. They did two great Beatle books in the mid-70s that I will forever cherish. And I think if you got into them and read them, you would too. They're great books and highly recommended. So that's it, folks. Just want to share a little fun story about a couple of fun books. Go back to my childhood, and all the best, and God bless. Bye-bye.